I was late to a wedding as a bridesmaid, and a millionaire fell in love with me at first sight.
I never thought a single wedding could change my life so completely. I mean, I'd attended plenty of weddings before, just like anyone else. But that day was different. I still remember waking up that morning with a sense of nothing special. Just another Saturday, just another friend's wedding. I had my routine, makeup, hair, choosing a dress I thought would fit in, not stand out. I had always been careful about blending in, about not being noticed too much. And yet somehow, that day demanded attention in ways I couldn't have imagined. The city was alive, buzzing with excitement, as if it knew something was about to happen. Streets were full of honking cars, laughter spilling from cafes, and I hurried through it all, trying to make up for being late. I had overslept, of course, and every minute felt heavier than the last. The dress I chose clung awkwardly in some places. My heels seemed taller than usual, and my heart was racing, not just because I was late, but because I had this strange feeling, like something unexpected was waiting for me. When I arrived, the wedding hall was a picture of perfection. White flowers, chandeliers sparkling, guests smiling as if the world was exactly as it should be. Everyone was in their element, dancing between conversations, sipping champagne, laughing at jokes I couldn't quite hear over the music. I was supposed to be just another bridesmaid, another face in the crowd. But as I entered, I felt eyes on me. Not just a casual glance, but a gaze that held something. Heavier, stronger. That's when I saw him. He was standing near the entrance, someone I didn't know, but his presence made the room feel different. He wasn't loud or flashy, not in the way some people used wealth or status to dominate a space. No, there was something quieter, more commanding about him. A millionaire, I later learned. Someone used to controlling everything around him. Yet in that moment, he looked as if even he couldn't control the way the world had paused around me. And when our eyes met, I felt it, a jolt, an almost electric connection I couldn't explain. I froze, caught between wanting to flee and wanting to see what this meant. But life never lets things be simple, does it? As I moved forward, trying to blend in, the whispers began. Not loud, but sharp enough to sting. "Late again," someone muttered. "She's always behind," another voice said. My cheeks burned, not just with embarrassment, but with a deeper, sharper hurt. Here I was, doing my best, rushing to be part of something beautiful, and suddenly it felt like my very existence was being judged. The world around me had turned cold, and everyone except him seemed ready to dismiss me for being myself. I tried to steady my breathing, to keep moving, to stay upright. But then a small stumble betrayed me. A bouquet slipped from my hand, flowers scattering across the floor. And just like that, all eyes turned, not in admiration, not in sympathy, but in judgment. The room's attention felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I could see him moving, trying to step closer, and yet everything in me screamed that I wasn't supposed to reach out, that I didn't belong. But even from a distance, his eyes held something protective, something that made me feel like I wasn't completely invisible. In that chaos, I realized how fragile the world's balance can be, how quickly judgment can overshadow kindness. A few minutes late, a single stumble, and suddenly, life felt unfair. And yet, through all of it, I noticed a strength in myself I hadn't known existed. I lifted my chin, straightened my shoulders, and moved forward as best I could, even when the room seemed determined to weigh me down. Every glance at him made my heart pound. He seemed to understand what was happening without a word, without a gesture. And in those silent moments, something unspoken passed between us, a connection built on awareness, on shared understanding, on an invisible thread that no one else could see. I didn't know it yet, But that thread was going to pull both of our lives into something we never expected. And then, just as I thought I might finally breathe, the impossible happened. A hand reached out, stopping me. A sharp voice echoed, "Step aside." It wasn't rude exactly, but it carried authority, judgment, and a world of rules I hadn't agreed to follow. My pulse jumped, my stomach twisted, and I realized that everything I had known, my routine, my safety, my carefulness, was useless here. The moment that should have been ordinary had become extraordinary, and I had no idea how it would end. Would I break under the weight of it all? Or would I find a way to stand my ground? I couldn't know yet, but in that instant, something inside me hardened, something that said, I am not invisible, I am not late, I am here, and I am more than the world wants me to be. And that's when everything started to shift, when the wedding, the millionaire, the whispers, and the judgment all collided into something neither of us could ignore. I could feel the room holding its breath as the tension grew thicker than the air itself. Every step I took toward the ceremony felt heavier than the last, as if invisible eyes were pressing down on me. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into the crowd, but I couldn't, not when he was there. That look in his eyes, steady and calm amid the chaos, anchored me in a way I hadn't expected. Somehow, in the middle of all the whispers and judging glances, he made me feel seen. He tried to approach me, but the world seemed determined to intervene. Guests shifted, organizers murmured instructions, and a few of the more important attendees shot disapproving looks my way. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but the subtle judgment stung more than any words could. For a moment, I wondered if I was overreacting, if I was imagining it all. But then I tripped slightly again, nearly losing my balance, and a ripple of murmurs followed. The weight of expectation, of being on time and perfect, pressed down on me like an invisible hand. I wanted to cry. I won't lie. I wanted to run and escape the eyes, the whispers, the weight of it all. And yet, I couldn't. Because there was something about him, something strong, silent, and undeniably present, that refused to let me give in. He wasn't loud, he wasn't making a scene, but his mere presence shifted everything. It was as if he was silently telling me, "You don't have to face this alone." And then it happened. A minor stumble, a stray heel catching on the floor, and suddenly, all eyes turned toward me, not with kindness, not with understanding, but with judgment. The bouquet I had been holding slipped entirely, flowers scattering across the polished floor. A collective gasp echoed, followed by whispers that sounded sharper than any criticism I'd ever heard. I felt my face flush, my heart pound, my chest tighten, as if the world itself were pressing down on me. He moved faster now, cutting through the crowd, trying to reach me. But just as he got close enough, another obstacle appeared. A hand blocking the path, a stern voice directing me to stand aside. It wasn't cruel, not really, but it carried the authority of the world telling me I didn't belong, that I had no right to be here. And I realized in that moment that this wasn't about a wedding or a bouquet. This was about control, about expectation, about the tiny ways people try to remind others of their place. I looked at him, and I could see it, the frustration, the anger, the helplessness flashing across his face. He was used to getting what he wanted, to controlling outcomes, to shaping the world around him. And yet, here he was, powerless to change the subtle, suffocating injustice unfolding before him. I think that's when we both understood something fundamental. This wasn't just a wedding. This wasn't just a minor slip or a late arrival. This was a moment that revealed the invisible walls we all navigate, the barriers that exist for reasons we rarely question. But I didn't crumble. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and took a deep breath. I wasn't just a bridesmaid who had arrived late. I was a person standing in the middle of judgment, standing against the invisible chains that tried to define me. And somehow, that defiance gave me strength, a pulse of courage that made every whispered comment, every critical glance, feel a little less heavy. He reached my side, finally, and for the first time since the day began, I felt a spark of relief. Not just because he was there, but because I realized that some connections, some people, can make you feel understood without a single word. He didn't judge me for being late. He didn't dismiss my stumble. He simply existed, as if silently sharing the weight I carried. And in that moment, amidst the chaos, I realized that maybe, just maybe, some stories are worth living fully, even when the world tries to reduce you to a single misstep. The ceremony continued around us, but for a moment, the room felt smaller, the crowd less significant. Every glance at him, every step he took toward me, reminded me that connection can exist in the strangest of places, in the most impossible of circumstances. The whispers persisted, but they became background noise, irrelevant to the thread tying us together. And yet, just when I thought we might finally breathe, something else happened. A subtle movement, a shift in the crowd, a hint that the world outside our tiny bubble of understanding wasn't done testing us. I felt it in my chest. The anticipation, the fear, the electricity of knowing that the story wasn't over. That the moment that had begun with judgment and whispers was about to escalate, pushing both of us to a breaking point we hadn't yet imagined. I looked up at him, and I saw it mirrored in his eyes. The determination, the tension, the knowledge that whatever happened next could define more than just this evening. And in that quiet, heavy pause, I understood something I couldn't yet articulate. Life is unpredictable, unfair, and often cruel, but it is also filled with moments of connection, of courage, and of unexpected, unexplainable magic. And we were standing right in the middle of one such moment, teetering between collapse and something extraordinary. The whispers were fading, the music playing, the crowd watching. But everything inside me screamed that the worst, and the most unforgettable, was about to happen. And in that heartbeat, I realized, sometimes, life's defining moments are not planned, not controlled, and not gentle. They hit you suddenly, brutally, and yet, if you survive them, they change you forever. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing louder than the music that filled the hall. Everything around me seemed amplified. The laughter, the whispers, even the shuffling of feet across the polished floor. But I wasn't really seeing them. All I could see was him. All I could feel was the pull between us, electric and undeniable, as if the universe had carved out a space for just the two of us amid the chaos. And then it happened, the moment that would change everything. A slip, a misstep, a fraction of a second where the world seemed to pause. My heel caught on the edge of the rug, and I nearly fell. Instinctively, he lunged forward, hand reaching for mine, but before our fingers could touch, the organizer stepped in. "Step aside," the sharp voice commanded, cutting through the air like a blade. Guests turned to look, some with curiosity, others with judgment, and I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't just the stumble that mattered. It was the way the room reacted, the collective expectation, the subtle but undeniable authority pressing down on me, telling me I didn't belong, reminding me that I was late, that I had disrupted the perfect flow of their world. And yet, amidst it all, I refused to shrink. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and met his eyes. There was a flicker of admiration there, mixed with frustration and concern, and it fueled a courage I hadn't realized I possessed. The whispers grew louder, though I tried to block them out. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, as if they couldn't decide whether to intervene or simply watch. And in that tension, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just fear or embarrassment. It was determination, raw and undeniable. I had made it this far, had navigated every glance and judgment, and I wasn't going to be pushed aside now. He finally reached me, and our eyes locked. No words, just a silent acknowledgement of what was happening. In that instant, the room seemed to shrink around us. Every gaze, every whisper, every judgmental glance fading into irrelevance. We existed in our own space, a bubble of understanding and connection that no one else could penetrate. And then the impossible happened. The guests held their breath as the tension escalated. He took a step closer, his hand hovering just inches from mine. I could feel the weight of every expectation, every rule, every barrier pressing down, threatening to separate us. But she didn't falter. My hands, steady, my chin high, I refused to move back. Not now. Not ever. It was a moment of reckoning. The room, the wedding, the judgment, all of it came crashing in, testing the boundaries of courage and defiance. He finally touched my hand, lightly, but the impact was monumental. The connection was electric, undeniable. For the first time that evening, I felt seen not as a late bridesmaid or a mistake, but as a person who belonged in this space, who mattered. And in that instant, I understood something profound. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, small, almost invisible, but it carries the power to change everything. The whispers continued, but they no longer had power over me. I could feel the shift, not just in him, but in myself. The fear, the tension, the invisible walls of expectation. They were still there, yes, but they were no longer insurmountable. Every glance, every heartbeat, every subtle movement reinforced the truth. The world might try to define you, to limit you, to reduce your presence, but it cannot erase your courage, your dignity, or the power of connection. In that heartbeat, I realized the story wasn't about being late. It wasn't about the stumble, or the judgment, or the whispers. It was about standing tall, about refusing to be invisible, about recognizing that some moments are worth every ounce of fear and uncertainty. And as our hands finally touched, as our eyes held each other's gaze, I felt the weight of the world shift, not away from us, but onto us, as if daring us to rise together. He squeezed my hand gently, a silent promise that he understood, that he would stand with me, and that in this moment, neither of us was alone. And though the crowd still watched, the judgment still lingered, and the expectation still hovered, it no longer mattered, because we had each other, and in that, everything else faded. For the first time that evening, I allowed myself to breathe, to feel, to believe that even in the most impossible circumstances, connection, courage, and resilience could prevail. But even as relief washed over me, I knew this wasn't the end. The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. Life had tested us, pushed us to the edge, and yet, it had revealed something essential. Strength isn't always loud, and love, unexpected, sudden, unstoppable, often arrives in the moments we least anticipate. And that's when I realized, fully and completely, that everything I had feared, everything I had doubted, everything I had tried to hide behind, the fear of judgment, the terror of being late, the pressure of expectations, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was this: being seen, being understood, and being brave enough to stand in the face of everything the world tried to throw at us. After that moment, the room seemed to breathe differently. The whispers that had once weighed down on me were still there, but they felt smaller, less important, almost irrelevant. I could feel his hand still lightly holding mine, grounding me in a way I had never known. And for the first time that evening, I realized something. I had survived. Not just the stumble, the judgment, or the late arrival, but the invisible weight of everyone expecting me to fail. Somehow, against all odds, I had stood my ground. Yet the world rarely rewards courage quietly. As we moved through the crowd, trying to find a corner to catch our breath, I could see the subtle resistance all around us. Some guests smiled politely, but their eyes carried skepticism, disbelief, even a hint of disapproval. The organizers whispered instructions as if they could erase what had just happened, as if a simple command could undo the defiance of a few human moments. And I realized then that the real challenge wasn't over. The real battle wasn't in the stumble or the late arrival. It was in how we carried ourselves afterward, in how we let the world judge us or fail to. He walked beside me, silent but present, and I felt a surge of gratitude, mixed with something I couldn't name. It wasn't just attraction, it was trust, understanding, and a shared sense that the world could be both cruel and beautiful at the same time. We didn't speak, words weren't needed. Our connection, forged in tension and defiance, was enough. Every glance, every subtle squeeze of his hand reminded me that courage and resilience aren't always visible to others, but they are undeniable when shared. As the evening continued, I watched how people reacted. Some guests tried to pretend nothing had happened, moving on as if the incident never occurred. Others stole glances, curiosity and admiration mingling with judgment. I realized then that life is like that, sometimes silent, sometimes noisy, but always testing the limits of patience, courage, and understanding. And in that realization, I found strength. I had faced scrutiny and survived. I had stood tall when the world tried to push me down. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly seen, not for perfection, but for authenticity, for resilience, for being exactly who I was, even in imperfection. He led me to a quieter area of the hall, away from the crowd, and for a few moments, it was just us. The music, the chatter, the judgmental glances faded into background noise. I took a deep breath and let myself feel the enormity of the evening, the fear, the tension, the triumph, and the unexpected magic of connection. In those quiet seconds, I understood something fundamental. Life doesn't hand out moments like this easily. They are rare, fleeting, and transformative. And if you survive them, you carry a piece of them forever. And yet, the weight of the world outside our bubble lingered. I couldn't ignore the larger truth, the judgment, the whispers, the subtle disapproval. They weren't just about weddings or being late. They were reminders of the unfairness that exists in every corner of life, the invisible barriers, the biases, the expectations that often fall heavier on some people than others. And I realized that what had happened to me in that hall could be anyone's story. Every misstep, every glance of disapproval, every moment of unfair judgment shapes people in ways they rarely talk about. He squeezed my hand gently, and in that touch, I felt an unspoken agreement. We had survived this together, but we were not naive. The world would continue to test us, push us, and judge us, but we had learned something essential, that courage, connection, and authenticity are stronger than whispers, expectations, or fleeting judgment. And that lesson would stay with us long after the music faded and the guests left. By the time the evening ended and the last guests trickled out, I felt a profound shift inside me. I had entered that wedding anxious, late, and uncertain, and I left feeling stronger, braver, and more alive than I had in years. I had faced judgment and chaos, but I had found connection, understanding, and resilience. And I knew, deep down, that those moments, the stumbles, the whispers, the quiet defiance, would shape not just this night, but every night to come. I glanced at him one last time before stepping into the quiet of the evening air. His eyes met mine, and I didn't need words. Everything had changed, and yet nothing had. We had survived. We had learned, and in that survival, we had discovered something far more powerful than judgment or expectation. The undeniable strength of courage, the beauty of authenticity, and the magic that happens when people truly see it as each other. And as I walked into the night, I couldn't help but think, how many people go through life unseen, unheard, or judged for reasons they can't control? How many moments of courage are quietly ignored, dismissed, or erased? And how many people, like me that day, are forced to stand, stumble, and rise again, discovering their own strength in the process? Life doesn't always give second chances, but it gives lessons. And that night, the wedding, the whispers, and the late arrival taught me something I will never forget. Standing tall, even in imperfection, is the only way to truly be seen. The night had finally settled, leaving the city quiet under the soft glow of streetlights. The wedding hall was empty now, its grandeur silent, its music replaced by the distant hum of traffic. And yet, even in the calm, the weight of the evening lingered. I could feel it pressing gently against my chest, the fear, the tension, the triumph, and the connection that had grown in the most impossible circumstances. I walked beside him, my hand still resting lightly in his, and I realized something profound. Nothing would ever feel ordinary again. That fleeting, electric connection, forged in whispers and judgment, had changed me. It wasn't just about a millionaire noticing a late bridesmaid. It was about being seen, being acknowledged, and being understood in a world that constantly tries to make you small. I had stood my ground, faced scrutiny, and emerged with a sense of self I had never known. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone. The world can be cruel in subtle ways. Judgment, expectation, and bias often slip quietly into ordinary moments, unnoticed until they weigh heavy enough to make you stumble. But courage, I realized, has a way of rising quietly as well. That night, amidst the judgment and whispers, I discovered strength I hadn't known I possessed. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, persistent, and undeniable. And for the first time, I felt it not just within myself, but reflected in someone else who stood beside me, silently affirming that I belonged. He didn't need to say anything. His presence, steady and unwavering, spoke volumes. In that shared silence, I understood the power of connection. Not the fleeting, surface-level kind, but the kind that forms when two people acknowledge each other fully, without judgment, without expectation. That night, our connection became a shield against the world's subtle cruelty. A reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, human understanding can prevail. As we left the hall, stepping into the cool night air, I felt the city around us shift. The streetlights cast long shadows, but they didn't frighten me. The night was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It carried the echo of courage, resilience, and the quiet defiance of standing tall when the world tries to push you down. And I realized that my story, our story, was bigger than just one evening, one wedding, one stumble. It was a reflection of the countless moments where people faced judgment, bias, and expectation, yet refused to be diminished. I glanced at him, and our eyes met. In that silent exchange, I understood something essential. Life will never stop testing us. There will always be whispers, stumbles, and moments of scrutiny. But it is in those moments, when the world expects you to falter, that courage is born. And it is that courage, quiet and persistent, that defines us, shapes us, and reminds us of our humanity. I thought of all the people who go unseen, unheard, dismissed for reasons they cannot control. I thought of how small moments, arriving late, a stumble, a glance, can carry unimaginable weight. And I realized that standing tall, facing the world with authenticity and bravery, is one of the most profound acts any person can commit. That night, I had witnessed it, I had lived it, and I would carry it with me forever. So I ask you, whoever is listening, how many moments of courage are quietly overlooked in your life? How many people around you are struggling, judged or underestimated, and how often do we fail to notice their strength? That night, I learned that being seen, being acknowledged, and standing tall in the face of judgment isn't just a personal victory. It's a reminder for all of us. Courage, connection, and authenticity can change lives, sometimes in a single heartbeat. And as I walked into the quiet streets, feeling the warmth of his hand still resting in mine, I knew this. The world can whisper, judge, and impose its expectations, but it cannot erase the truth of who we are, the courage we carry, or the connections that transform us forever. That wedding, that stumble, that fleeting glance, they were not just events of a single night. They were a lesson, a story, a reminder that the smallest acts of bravery can leave the deepest mark, and I will never forget it.